Every civilization that has ever existed has had one. A god whose only job, whose entire divine purpose was to manage the dead. Think about that for a second. These cultures built gods for everything. The sun, the harvest, the sea, love, war, justice, wisdom. And then they looked at death, the one thing that touched every single person, without exception, without mercy, without negotiation, and they said, this is too important to leave unmanaged. This needs a god, not a monster, not a demon, a god, with a title, with a domain, with rules, and what they built across cultures that never spoke to each other, across centuries that had nothing in common, is one of the most revealing collections of portraits in human history. Because the god of death that a civilization invents tells you everything about how that civilization understood life. If your god of death is a gentle judge, you believe life has meaning and death has order. If your god of death is an impartial bureaucrat, you believe the universe is fair but not warm. If your god of death is a trickster, you believe death comes when it wants and cannot be reasoned with. If your god of death is a grieving woman sitting on a cold throne, you believe that even the gods feel the weight of ending. Today we go through every major death god in every major mythology. We look at who they are, what they actually do, what their stories tell us, and what all of them together reveal about the one experience every human being shares. Let's meet them. Anubis, the god who invented justice. We begin in Egypt, because in many ways, Egypt gave the world its first fully realized death god, and he is not what most people expect. Anubis, the jackal-headed god. Black fur, golden skin, alert ears, watchful eyes. He is one of the most immediately recognizable figures in all of ancient religion and one of the most misunderstood. People see the jackal head and assume dangerous, threatening, monstrous, wrong. Anubis is the protector of the dead. His job, and this is crucial, is not to cause death, not to collect souls like some ancient grim reaper. His job is to make sure that what happens after death is handled correctly, with precision, with care, with absolute integrity. Let's go through what Anubis actually did. He invented mummification. According to Egyptian myth, when Osiris was murdered by Set and his body scattered across Egypt, it was Anubis who found the pieces, reassembled them, and performed the first mummification, preserving the body of a god so that Osiris could live again. Every mummification performed on every Egyptian body from that point forward was a recreation of Anubis's original act. Every priest who wrapped a body in linen and recited the spells wore a jackal mask. They were not performing a ritual. They were becoming Anubis for the duration of the ceremony. He guarded the tombs. Jackals were a practical reason for Anubis's form. Jackals actually lived near Egyptian cemeteries, attracted by the smell of the dead. The Egyptians, with their gift for meaning-making, took this threatening presence and transformed it into protection. If jackals were already there, let them be divine guardians. He conducted the dead. Anubis guided newly dead souls through the Duat, the underworld, to the Hall of Two Truths. He held their hand through the terrifying corridors of the afterlife. He stood beside them at the moment of judgment. He performed the weighing of the heart. This is the scene that defines Anubis in popular imagination. The dead person's heart on one side of the scale, the feather of Ma'at on the other. Anubis held the scale. His hands were the instrument of cosmic justice. And if the heart was heavier than the feather, Anubis turned the soul over to Ammit, the devourer, not with pleasure, not with cruelty, with the precise, sorrowful attention of a god who understood that some things cannot be saved. What Anubis tells us about Egypt. The Egyptians were a civilization obsessed with order, with Ma'at, the principle of truth, balance, and cosmic correctness. Their god of death reflects this completely. He doesn't rage, he doesn't trick, he doesn't hunger, he measures with absolute accuracy. The Egyptian afterlife is not arbitrary, it is not cruel, it is a system, and Anubis is the system's most careful administrator. In a world where the Nile could flood and destroy everything, where the sun had to be protected from chaos every night, where the universe was always one broken ritual away from collapse, a god who held the scales and kept them perfectly balanced was not just comforting, he was essential. Osiris, the god who died so you could live again, Anubis invented the system. But over time, in a process that took centuries, another god took over its administration, Osiris. And Osiris is the most theologically important death god in ancient Egypt because of one thing: he died. Osiris was not always a death god. He began as a god of agriculture, of fertility, of the flood that made Egypt's fields green, a good king, a beloved ruler. His brother Set, the god of chaos and storms, murdered him, dismembered his body, and scattered the pieces across Egypt. His wife Isis, the greatest of all Egyptian goddesses, searched the entire country, gathered the pieces, and with Anubis's help, reassembled and reanimated her husband. Osiris was resurrected, but he could not remain in the land of the living. He descended to the underworld and became its king, and he brought something with him that changed Egyptian theology forever: the promise that death is not the end. Osiris died. Osiris was resurrected. Therefore, every Egyptian who died and was properly mummified, who knew the correct spells, who had their heart weighed and found worthy every one of them, would become one with Osiris. The formula in Egyptian funerary texts: Osiris. Not the dead person going to see Osiris, the dead person becoming Osiris, merging with the god of resurrection. This is a staggering theological claim. Not you will go to a nice place, not a god will take care of you, but you will become divine. Osiris transformed the Egyptian afterlife from a bureaucratic processing system into a promise of transformation. He made death not an ending, but a metamorphosis, and he did it by going first. The king who ruled the dead was himself dead. He understood what his subjects had experienced. He had been murdered, scattered, grieved, and gathered. He sat on his throne in the Hall of Two Truths, green-skinned, wrapped in white linen, holding the crook and flail not as a god who stood above death, but as one who had gone through it, the god of death, who was also the god of resurrection. The Egyptians, 3,000 years before Christianity, had built their entire theology around a god who died and rose again. Hades, the most misunderstood god in history. Let's address something immediately. Hades is not evil. He is not the Greek Satan. He is not the enemy of the Olympians. He is not a villain. He is one of the three most powerful gods in the Greek pantheon, a son of the Titans Cronus and Rhea, a brother of Zeus and Poseidon. When the three brothers divided the cosmos after defeating their father, Zeus took the sky, Poseidon took the sea, and Hades took the underworld. He did not choose the worst domain. He drew the short lot, and he administered his domain with complete impartiality, total effectiveness, and zero warmth. What Hades actually is: a king, an administrator, a god defined almost entirely by what he does not do. He does not hunt the living. He does not cause death. He does not tempt or corrupt or destroy. He simply receives what death sends him and governs what he receives. He is just. He is consistent. He plays no favorites. This made the Greeks profoundly uncomfortable, not because Hades was evil, but because he was indifferent. He could not be bargained with. He could not be flattered. He accepted prayers and offerings so rarely that the Greeks barely bothered to build temples to him. There is something deeply unsettling about a powerful figure who simply does not care whether you want his attention or not. One time, Hades was moved. The myth of Orpheus, perhaps the most heartbreaking story in all of Greek mythology, tells of a musician whose wife Eurydice died on their wedding day, bitten by a serpent. Orpheus descended to the underworld, and he played. His music was so extraordinary, so saturated with grief and love, that the rivers of the underworld stopped flowing. Sisyphus sat on his boulder and listened. Tantalus forgot his hunger. The Furies wept, and Hades, the impartial, unmovable king, leaned forward on his throne. His queen Persephone hid her face and cried. He gave Eurydice back, with one condition. Orpheus must walk ahead. He must not look back until they reached the sunlight. If he looked back, she was gone forever. He looked back. Of course, he looked back. And in that moment, in Hades's refusal to make an exception twice, in his quiet return of Eurydice to the dead, we see what the Greek god of death actually represents. The rules exist because death is permanent. Exceptions to permanence are not mercy. They are chaos. Hades did not take Eurydice because he was cruel. He took her because the alternative was a world where death could be undone, and that world, the Greeks understood, would be far worse than the one they had. Persephone. One cannot discuss Hades without his queen. The story of her abduction dragged into the underworld while picking flowers. Her mother Demeter causing winter in her grief. The compromise that brought her back for 6 months each year is one of the oldest stories in Western literature. But what's often missed, Persephone was not simply a victim. In later Greek tradition, she became a genuinely powerful ruler of the underworld, wise, just, and in some accounts, more feared than her husband. She had the authority to grant or deny the requests of mortal heroes who descended to Hades seeking help. The queen of the dead chose her throne, even if the choice began as a theft. Yama, the first man who ever died in Hindu mythology. The god of death is not a god who is always a god. Yama was the first human being who ever died. This is the detail that makes Yama unlike any other death deity in any tradition. He did not descend from the divine realm to manage death. He was not appointed by a pantheon. He died first, before anyone else, and by dying first, he opened the road and became its keeper. His name means the restrainer, the one who holds the boundary between living and dead. What Yama looks like, in his most common depiction, Yama sits on a throne or rides a great black buffalo. His skin is green or dark. He carries a noose, the pasha, with which he catches departing souls, and a staff topped with a skull. Around him are his attendants, his record keepers, and his messengers, the yamduts, who come for the dying and escort them to his court. Beside him sits Chitragupta, the divine accountant. Chitragupta maintains the complete record of every human soul's, every action through every life, a ledger of karma so comprehensive that nothing is ever lost or miscounted. When a soul arrives before Yama, Chitragupta opens the book. There is no argument, no appeal. The record is perfect. How Yama judges. Yama weighs the accumulated karma of the soul's most recent life and all its previous lives. Based on this weight, he assigns the next destination, one of the heavens, one of the hells, or rebirth in a new form at a new level of existence. The hells in Hindu cosmology, the Narakas, are not permanent. They are purgatories. A soul spends time there commensurate with its negative karma, is purified, and then continues its journey. Even in Yama's court, the goal is not punishment, it is correction. Yama and Nachiketa, one of the most beautiful stories in Hindu literature, the Katha Upanishad, is about a young boy named Nachiketa who is accidentally sent to Yama's realm before his time. Yama is absent for 3 days. When he returns, he finds a Brahmin boy waiting at his door, and Brahmin guests, even in the land of the dead, must be honored. He offers Nachiketa 3 boons as compensation. Nachiketa uses his 3rd boon to ask the question no one else has dared. What is there after death? Yama tries to dissuade him, offers wealth, offers pleasure, offers kingdoms, offers anything else. Nachiketa refuses them all, and Yama, moved by the boy's absolute commitment to the one question that matters, teaches him the nature of the immortal soul, the Atman, the truth that transcends death entirely. The god of death teaches a child that death is an illusion. Only the Hindu tradition produces a death god whose most famous act is revealing that he is ultimately irrelevant. Hel, the goddess who felt every death. We've met her before in this series, but today we go deeper. Hel, daughter of Loki. ruler of the realm of the same name. Half her body the warm pink of living flesh, half the blue-gray, rotting texture of a corpse that has been cold too long. The other death gods we've met are remote, impartial, administrative. They receive the dead with the efficiency of someone who has done this for a very long time and has stopped being surprised by any of it. Hell is different. Hell feels it. The mythology doesn't say this directly. The Norse sources are sparse and fragmentary. But her description, her realm, her very body speaks it clearly. She is not separated from death. She wears it. One half of her is already there. She didn't choose this. She was cast into the underworld by Odin, thrown into the cold, because her father was Loki, because her very existence threatened the order of things. She received the dead not because she sought the role, but because she was given it by a god who feared what she represented and decided the best way to manage her was to make her responsible for what she embodied. Her realm. Hell's hall is called Eluthnir, we named the furniture before. Stumbling block for a doorstep, famine for a knife, sickbed for a bed, glimmering misfortune for the bed curtains. This is not the hall of a god who enjoys her domain. This is the home of someone who has accepted the worst and furnished it honestly. The moment that defines hell. When Balder died, the most beloved of all the gods, the shining figure of light and joy, and descended to her realm, all of Asgard was devastated. The gods sent a messenger, Hermod, riding Odin's horse Sleipnir, to beg for Balder's return. Hel listened, and she made an offer that was almost generous. If every being in all the 9 worlds, living and dead, god and creature, stone and tree, wept for Balder, she would release him. Every being in existence wept. Every one, except one. A giantess named Thuk, almost certainly Loki in disguise, who refused. Balder stayed. And here is what strikes me about Hel's offer. She didn't have to make it. She owed nothing to the gods who threw her into the cold. She had no obligation to release the dead. The dead were hers, by divine law. She chose to offer a path. She set a condition that was achievable, nearly impossible, but achievable. And when it failed, she kept her word. She didn't gloat. She didn't punish. She kept Balder, quietly, as she kept all the others. The Norse god of death for the ordinary dead, for the vast majority of humanity who died in their beds and their fields and their fishing boats, was a being who had been judged by her appearance, before she ever did anything, who had been exiled for who her father was, who governed the cold and the gray with the kind of dignity that only comes from having had everything taken from you and choosing not to become cruel because of it. The most human death god in any mythology, maybe the half-dead, woman sitting alone in the cold, waiting for everyone to arrive eventually. Mictlantecuhtli the god at the bottom of everything. The Aztec god of death is not subtle. Mictlantecuhtli, the lord of Mictlan, the lord of the land of the dead, is depicted as a skeleton, or a figure with a skull face and exposed bones protruding through his flesh. He wears a headdress of owl feathers, owls being omens of death, and necklaces of human eyeballs, hands, and hearts. He is surrounded by spiders, bats, and the wind of knives. He is one of the most visually intense death deities in any mythology, and also one of the least understood in the West, because Aztec religion is still widely filtered through a lens of shock and horror rather than theological understanding. Let's fix that. What Mictlantecuhtli actually does, he rules the 9th and deepest level of Mictlan, the destination for most ordinary dead. He does not punish the souls who arrive there. He simply receives them after their 4-year journey through the levels above. He is paired with his wife, Mictecacihuatl, the Lady of the Dead, who is equally important in Aztec death theology, and who is actually the figure that modern Dia de los Muertos imagery is most directly descended from. The elaborate skeletal woman in flowers and color she is Mictecacihuatl, transformed through centuries into something that is as much celebration as grief. The creation story. One of the most extraordinary Aztec myths involves Mictlantecuhtli and the god Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, one of the most important gods in the Mesoamerican pantheon. After the destruction of the fourth sun, the gods needed to create humans for the fifth Sunday. The raw material required was the bones of the dead from the previous world, stored in Mictlantecutli's realm. Quetzalcoatl descended to the ninth level of Mictlan and asked Mictlantec for the bones. Mictlantecutli agreed and then immediately tried to prevent Quetzalcoatl from leaving. He set traps, he sent obstacles, he tried to reclaim the bones. Quetzalcoatl escaped barely with the bones. He brought them to the surface world. The gods ground them with their own blood and created humanity. Humans are made from the bones of the dead. Life emerges from what death stored. Mictlantecutli tried to keep them. And in trying to keep them and providing the resistance that Quetzalcoatl had to overcome, he made the creation of humanity a struggle. Something earned, something that cost something. The Aztec god of death is the reason humans exist. His hoarding of the bones forced the gods to fight for them. Even the deepest death is part of creation. Izanami, Emma-O, and Shinigami, the Japanese trinity of death. Japan gives us not one but three interlocking death figures, each operating at a different level of the same system. Izanami the first. In the Kojiki, Japan's oldest text, Izanami is not a death goddess by design. She is the mother of the gods, co-creator of the Japanese islands, one of the first two beings. She dies giving birth to the fire god and descends to Yomi, the dark world. When her husband Izanagi comes for her and sees her rotting body in the darkness, he flees in horror. She pursues him, transformed, furious, betrayed by his revulsion. She sends 8 thunder gods and the women of Yomi after him. At the entrance, they have their last conversation across the boulder that now seals the world of the dead from the living. She says, "I will kill 1,000 of your people every day." He says, "I will create 1,500 every day." And that exchange, that exact ratio of death to birth, 1,000 to 1,500, is, in Japanese myth, the origin of both death and reproduction as permanent features of the world. Izanami became death, not by choice, not by divine appointment, but by what happened to her. She was transformed by her own dying into something that hungers for the living. Emma-O, the judge. Drawn heavily from the Hindu Yama via Buddhist transmission, Emma-O is the king of the dead who reviews every soul's life through his 2 great mirrors. No deception is possible. Every secret act is visible. He assigns souls to the appropriate hell for purification or allows them to proceed toward reincarnation or paradise. Emma-O is bureaucracy made divine, efficient, thorough, impossible to bribe. Shinigami, the Reapers. The Shinigami death gods, death spirits, are the most personally familiar of Japan's death figures. They come for individuals. They appear at the moment of death, sometimes visible, sometimes not. In some traditions, they can be bargained with, tricked, or persuaded. In others, they are as inevitable as breathing. The Shinigami entered popular culture so thoroughly through manga, anime, films that they may now be the most globally recognized Japanese mythological figure. What the Japanese Trinity tells us, death has levels. The cosmic level of a goddess transformed by experience, the judicial level of a king who reviews the record, and the intimate level of the figure that comes for you specifically, in your specific moment, and takes you personally. The Grim Reaper, the newest death god in history. We've traveled through 4,000 years of death gods. Now we come to the most familiar one of all, and the most recent. The Grim Reaper, the skeletal figure in black robes, carrying a scythe, is not ancient. He does not appear in the Bible. He is not from classical antiquity. He was born in 14th century Europe, specifically from the Black Death. Between 1347 and 1351, the bubonic plague killed somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of the entire population of Europe. 50 million people, perhaps more, in 4 years. Nothing in recorded Western history before or since produced death at that speed, at that scale, with that absolute democracy of victims. Kings and peasants, priests and children, the devout and the sinful, the healthy and the weak. Death did not discriminate, and out of this catastrophe emerged a new artistic tradition, the dance macabre, the dance of death. Paintings and woodcuts and sculptures showing a skeletal figure leading people from every walk of life in a dance toward the grave. The Pope, the Emperor, the merchant, the farmer, the infant, all dancing, all going. The skeleton became the universal symbol of death because the plague had made something undeniable. Beneath every human exterior, every robe of authority, every face of beauty, every armor of power, there was a skeleton. And the skeleton was going to outlast everything built on top of it. The scythe came from the harvest. The plague arrived in the late summer, in harvest season, and the image of death as a harvester cutting down lives, as a farmer cuts wheat, was immediately, instinctively right. No malice, no judgment, just the efficient gathering of what had grown. The black robe came from the mourning dress of medieval Europe. The Grim Reaper, assembled from these pieces, became the Western world's death god. Without anyone officially deciding he was one, he emerged from collective trauma, passed through art and literature, and arrived in the modern world as the most universally recognized symbol of mortality on Earth. He has no mythology, no stories, no relationships, no origin in divine will. He is what happens when a civilization loses its gods, but keeps its terror. Other death gods, you need to know. We've covered the major figures, but the world is vast, and its death gods are many. Let's move through 8 more quickly, but properly. Ereshkigal, Mesopotamia's queen of the underworld, not a monster, a queen who rules the great below with absolute authority and experiences something almost like grief at the scale of what she governs. In the myth of Inanna's descent, when Inanna arrives and is killed, Ereshkigal mourns not Inanna specifically, but the endless procession of the dying, a goddess who feels the weight of every death she receives. Set, Egypt's god of chaos who killed Osiris, but was never a death god in the traditional sense. He is disorder, not death, the force that disrupts the system, not the one who administers it. The difference matters. Thanatos, the Greek personification of death, not a god with a personality and stories and power, but the abstract force of dying itself, made into a gentle young man. His twin brother is Hypnos, sleep. The Greeks saw death and sleep as siblings, death as the permanent sleep as the daily rehearsal for it. Azrael, the angel of death in Islamic and Jewish tradition. Neither god nor devil, but an angel of enormous power whose single function is to collect souls at the moment of death. Described in Islamic tradition as having so many wings and so vast a body that his feet stand on the lowest earth while his head touches the sky, and the deaths of all human beings are recorded on a great tree in his presence. Baron Samedi, the Haitian Vodou Lo of the dead, one of the most vivid death figures in any tradition. He wears a black top hat and tuxedo, smokes cigars, drinks rum with hot peppers, speaks in profanity, dances at the crossroads between life and death, and is the only one who can prevent a person's death if he chooses to accept a bribe of food, drink, or humor. He represents the irreverence of death, the fact that it comes for everyone, including those who take themselves too seriously, and it has a sense of humor about it. The Morrigan, the Celtic crow, goddess of death and fate. She appears on battlefields before and after combat. She is not the cause of death, she is its witness, the presence that acknowledges that this death happened, that this person fell, that this moment is real. She is grief made divine. Yanluo Wang, Chinese mythology's king of hell, drawing on the same Indian Yama tradition that shaped Japanese Mao, but transformed through Taoist and Buddhist influence into a figure who presides over the 10 courts of Chinese hell, each court dedicated to a different category of sin and a different form of purification. What every death god has in common, across every culture, every century, every continent here, is what the gods of death share. Pattern 1. They are not the cause. With almost no exceptions, death gods do not cause death. They receive it, they administer it, they judge it, they witness it. Death itself in almost every tradition is impersonal. It is the nature of existence. The death god is the manager appointed to handle what the nature of existence produces. This matters theologically. It means that in most traditions, God or the gods are not responsible for death in the way we might intuitively assume. Death is a feature of the cosmos, not a punishment inflicted by a divine will. The death god is more like a hospital administrator than an executioner. Pattern 2. They are judges, not executioners. The weighing of the heart, the mirrors of Mao, the record of Chitragupta, the Chinvat bridge, the 3 judges of Hades. The god of death is almost universally also the god of accountability, the place where the accounting happens, the being before whom the truth of your life is finally, completely known. There is something both terrifying and deeply comforting about this. The universe keeps score. Everything you did, everything you chose, everything you avoided, everything you hid is known, not by other humans who can be deceived, by something that cannot be. Pattern 3. They cannot be permanently defeated. Heroes descend to the underworld. Orpheus moves Hades to tears. Heracles captures Cerberus. Odysseus visits the dead. Inanna enters the underworld and is released. The Buddha defeats Mara, but none of these victories are permanent. Eurydice is lost again. Cerberus is returned. The dead remain dead. The god of death always gets what the god of death is owed. This is one of the most consistent mythological statements across all of human history. Death is not a problem that can be solved. It can be delayed. It can be negotiated with, briefly. It can be faced with courage or wisdom or beauty, but it collects. Pattern 4. They are changed by their role. Hades did not want his domain. Hell was thrown into hers. Izanami became her death self through dying. Yama was simply the first to die. None of the most psychologically complex death gods chose their function from a position of power. They were assigned it, or thrust into it, or became it through suffering. And every one of them carries the weight of that in how they govern. The god of death, who was not born to die, who administers death from a position of untouched divinity, is rare, and feels thin compared to the ones who know what they govern, because they have been there themselves. Pattern 5. They are not evil. This is perhaps the most important pattern, and the one most violated by popular culture. Hades is not Satan. Hell is not a demon. Anubis is not a monster. Mictlantecutli is not a villain. Yama is not an enemy. They are administrators of something universal, necessary, and in almost every tradition, ultimately purposeful. The equation of death gods with evil is a relatively recent cultural development, rooted largely in medieval Christian iconography that borrowed the imagery of pagan death gods and reassigned it to demonic figures. In their original contexts, every death god we've covered today was understood as a figure of order, of maintenance, of the cosmic function that makes life possible by keeping the ledger balanced and the boundary clear. Without the god of death, the dead would accumulate in the world of the living. The boundary between living and dead would dissolve. The grief that fuels culture, the awareness of mortality that motivates greatness, the urgency that makes love valuable, all of it requires death to be real, permanent, and managed. The god of death is not the enemy of life. The god of death is what makes life matter. Every civilization that has ever existed has looked at death and done the same thing. They gave it a face, a name, a domain, a set of rules, a personality. Because a universe in which death is a nameless, faceless, meaningless force is a universe in which life is also nameless, faceless, meaningless. The god of death is paradoxically the guardian of the value of life. Anubis holds the scale because your life had weight. Osiris rose again so you could know that ending is not the same as stopping. Hades keeps the boundary so that love, having a limit, means something. Yama reads the record so that every hidden act of kindness was witnessed after all. Hell receives the ordinary dead with the dignity of someone who knows what it is to be judged by your surface. Mictlantecuhtli stored the bones that became you. The Grim Reaper came for the powerful and the powerless alike and made them equal one last time. Every one of these figures says the same thing in a different language. Your life was real. Your death is real. And something is paying attention. Whether that something exists, whether any of these gods have ever stood at any bedside and waited, that question belongs to you. But the fact that every human mind in every corner of this planet produced an answer to it that belongs to all of us. Here's what you walked away with today. Anubis invented justice through the scale. Osiris made death a promise of transformation. Hades governed the boundary with impartial perfection. Yama was the first man to die and became the keeper of the road. Hell was cast into the cold and found a way to rule it with dignity. Mictlantecuhtli stored the bones that became human life. The Grim Reaper was born from plague and became the West's most democratic symbol of mortality. And across every tradition, the death god is not evil. They are the force that makes life irreplaceable. Subscribe if you want to know. And the question for the comments: which death god from any tradition would you most want waiting for you, and why? See you on the other side.